The world of 10th century England rests beneath a wide, shifting sky, where the land and the heavens are bound together in an ancient, silent dialogue. It is the year 950, an era where the rhythms of human life are dictated entirely by the lengthening of shadows, the turning of the earth, and the gentle, persistent whisper of the wind across the rolling downs of Wessex. Here, the modern world has not yet left its deep, permanent scars upon the landscape. Instead, vast tracts of primeval oak forest sway in the damp breeze, stretching out until they dissolve into soft, rolling meadows that meet the grey, mist-laden boundaries of the sea. The air is clean, carrying with it the mineral sharpness of the North Sea and the heavy, fertile scent of damp soil, fallen leaves, and waking stone. To walk through this landscape is to move through a living canvas painted in shades of deep moss green, slate grey, and the pale, muted silver of the morning mist. In this quiet corner of the medieval world, the changing of the seasons is not merely a visual transition, but a deeply felt, physical reality. When autumn approaches, or when winter holds the land in its cold, unyielding embrace, the atmosphere becomes heavy, laden with moisture that hangs suspended in the air like a fine, invisible veil. This dampness settles over the low timber homes, the thatched roofs of small hamlets, and the quiet clearings where families have gathered for generations. It is a time when the boundaries between the external world and the internal life of the individual become porous. The heavy pressure of approaching storm system, rolling inward from the choppy waters of the English Channel, can be felt in the very bones of those who dwell beneath its path. The air grows dense, pressing down upon the hills, and with this atmospheric shift comes a collective, quiet vulnerability. For the people of this time, the body is not separate from the earth. It is a small world within a larger world, responding to the same tides, the same winds, and the same sudden drops in temperature. When the weather changes abruptly, shifting from the soft warmth of late summer to the biting, damp chill of a sudden autumn gale, the human mind and body bear the weight of the transition. Across the settlements, from the humble huts of the farmers to the stone halls of the nobility, a familiar weariness often settles in. It manifests as a dull, persistent ache behind the eyes, a heavy cloud that darkens the thoughts, and a restless, unmoored anxiety that leaves the spirit feeling as fractured and scattered as dry leaves before a storm. Without the artificial sanctuaries of the modern era, these individuals must face the raw, unmediated power of nature, seeking comfort in a world that can often feel vast, indifferent, and overwhelming. Yet, even in the midst of this vulnerability, there exists a profound, quiet reassurance. The earth that brings the cold wind and the heavy pressure also holds the secrets to their relief. An hanging canopy of clouds, growing quietly along the edges of muddy tracks, in the undisturbed corners of pasturelands, and along the banks of chalk streams, lie the wild weeds of England. To the untrained eye, these plants are humble, inconspicuous, and easily overlooked as they sway in the soft twilight. But to those who possess the patience to look closer, to study the intricate patterns of their leaves and the subtle fragrances they release when crushed between the fingers, these weeds are a source of profound healing. They are the quiet sentinels of the meadow, waiting to be gathered, understood, and transformed into remedies that can calm the troubled mind, soothe the aching brow, and restore a sense of gentle balance to a weary world. The coastal winds of early England possess a voice that is both ancient and unyielding, carrying the weight of the immense, cold sea across the lowlands of Wessex. As the seasons tilt away from the gentle warmth of summer, these winds shift, transforming into heavy, moisture-laden currents that roll over the chalk cliffs and deep into the interior river valleys. For the Anglo-Saxon communities living in small, timber-framed settlements, this change in the air is felt long before first dark storm clouds appear on the horizon. The atmosphere undergoes a subtle but profound thickening, a drop in pressure that registers within the physical architecture of the human body. The temples begin to throb with a slow, rhythmic pulse, mimicking the distant, heavy break of the waves against the shore. This weather-induced weariness, known to the local inhabitants as a deep clouding of the senses, settles over the villages like an invisible mantle of slate grey. Living in such close proximity to the natural world means that every shift in the wind is an event that must be endured. When the damp gales blow directly from the east, crossing the cold waters of the North Sea, they bring a specific kind of cold that seems to bypass the thick wool of winter cloaks and sink directly in the bone. This persistent dampness does not merely chill the skin, it creates a heavy, stagnating pressure within the head, making the eyes sensitive to the flickering light of the hearth fire and rendering the simplest daily tasks difficult. The mind, normally attuned to the productive rhythms of agricultural life, becomes clouded and slowed, trapped in a state of perpetual restlessness. It is a form of fatigue that is deeply tied to the geography of the island, an affliction born of the mist, the marshlands, and the sudden, unpredictable fluctuations of the northern sky. Inside the small, thatched dwellings, the air becomes thick with the scent of burning oak logs and damp earth as families seek shelter from the rising gale. The central hearth, while providing warmth, all creates a dense atmosphere of smoke that sways lazily on the rafters, mirroring the heavy fog that blankets the fields outside. In these moments, the physical discomfort of a persistent headache transitions into deeper, emotional weariness. The uncertainty of the coming season, the fear of a failed harvest, and the sheer isolation of the winter months begin to weigh upon the spirit. The mind, fatigued by the constant pressure of the elements, easily falls prey to anxiety, wandering down dark and circular paths of thought that offer no easy resolution. The smallness of the human world becomes glaringly apparent when contrasted with the vast, churning sky above. Yet, this shared experience of physical and mental weariness fosters a quiet, collective resilience among the people. They do not view these seasonal ailments as isolated malfunctions of the body, but rather as a natural, expected response to a world out of balance. They understand when the earth is heavy with rain and the sky is obscured by darkness. The human vessel must also experience a period of heaviness and shadow. To rush the healing process, or to fight aggressively against the natural fatigue of the body, is seen as a misunderstanding of life's intrinsic design. Instead, they look for ways to soften the impact of the seasons, to find small, quiet sanctuaries of relief within the familiar textures of their environment. It is within this atmospheric landscape of mist, pressure, and persistent ache that the need for a deeper, more systematic understanding of natural remedies becomes paramount, setting the stage for the dedicated work of the early English healers. Deep within the stone precinct of the monastery at Winchester, the scriptorium remains a sanctuary of absolute silence, insulated from the damp, driving winds that sweep across the courtyard outside. In this high-ceilinged room, the air is still, cool, and thick with the distinct, comforting aromas of aged vellum, dried animal glues, and the sweet, warm scent of burning beeswax candles. The light here is precious and scarce, filtering through narrow, deep-set windows to cast long, gentle shadows across the wooden desks where the scribes work. Here, the pass of time is measured not by the ticking of a clock, but by the slow, rhythmic scratch of a goose quill against a prepared sheepskin page, and the gradual shortening of the candles that illuminate the sacred task of preservation. It is within this quiet, meditative space that the scattered medical wisdom of the age is given a permanent, physical form. The preparation of the materials for a manuscript like the Leech Book is a process that requires immense patience and a deliberate, slow-handed care. Months before a word is written, the vellum pages must be scraped, stretched, and rubbed with pumice stone until they achieve a texture as smooth and pale as a winter flower. Each page possesses its own unique character, a subtle variance in grain and thickness that responds to the touch of the scribe's hand. Beside the sloping writing desks sit small horn vessels containing ink, mixed by hand from oak galls gathered in the surrounding forest, iron salts, and pure rainwater. This ink is deep, rich, and viscous, holding within its dark liquid matrix the power to preserve human thought across centuries. To watch the ink slowly dry upon the pale vellum is to witness the freezing of time itself, a deliberate act of memory against the fleeting nature of human existence. As the candle flame flickers gently in the quiet room, casting a warm, amber glow over the workspace, the scribe prepares his tools with a steady, unhurried precision. A small iron knife is held in the left hand, ready to trim the point of the quill or to gently scrape away an imperfect stroke, while the right hand guides the feather with a soft, practiced pressure. The letters of the Old English vernacular script appear one by one, forming elegant, rounded loops and sturdy straight lines that anchor the fluid spoken language into the physical world. There is a deep, comforting rhythm to this work, an intentional slowing down of the mind that mirrors the very remedies being recorded upon the page. Each sentence written is an act of devotion, an offering of clarity and order to a world that so often feels chaotic, unpredictable, and weighed down by physical suffering. As the twilight deepens and the cold mist begins to press against the leaded window panes of Winchester, the scriptorium becomes even more inward-facing, a small island of light in a darkening landscape. The finished pages are carefully gathered, inspected under the steady glow of the candle, and left to rest so that the heavy iron gall ink can bind completely with the fibers of the skin. Every stroke of the pen, every detailed description of a wild herb or a soothing poultice, is treated with the utmost reverence, for these pages carry the weight of human hope. They represent a collective desire to understand the earth, to find solace in its growth, and to offer a gentle, guiding light to those who walk through the shadows of illness and fatigue. The channel is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of relaxation and peaceful sleep. In the mid-10th century, the figure of Bald stands out not as a magician or a mystic, but as a man of profound observation, patience, and deep quietude. As a leech, the Old English term for a physician or healer, Bald views his calling as a sacred stewardship of the natural world. He does not see him as someone who conquers disease through force, but rather as an interpreter of nature's hidden signatures. To Bald, every hill, valley, and hedgerow in Wessex is a vast, open library written by the hand of the Creator, where the remedy for every human sorrow is already growing silently, waiting to be found. His mind is shaped by a rare blend of practical experience and deep philosophic contemplation. He understands that the human body is intimately connected to the land, and that true healing requires a return to balance, a realignment of the individual with the gentle rhythms of the earth. Bald's day life is defined by a slow, deliberate attentiveness to the subtle changes in his environment. While others might pass a patch of wild weeds along a muddy track with a second glance, Bold pauses to observe the hairiness of a leaf, the specific shade of a stem, and the delicate fragrance released when a plant is warmed by the midday sun. He tracks the arrival of migratory birds, the shifting colors of the forest canopy, and the rising and setting of the constellations, knowing that each of these events influence the potency of the earth's medicine. His approach to healing is fundamentally gentle. He believes that harsh illnesses require soft remedy, and that the mind must be calmed before the physical body can fully release its tension. This philosophy places him at odds with the hurried, chaotic world, turning his practice into a sanctuary of peace for those who seek his counsel. For many years, Bold travels across the southern kingdoms of England, quietly gathering the collective medical wisdom of his era. He sits by the hearths of elder village women who have spent their lives tending the sick, listen to the experiences of fellow leeches in bustling market towns, and studies the rare, treasured manuscripts preserved within the great monastic libraries. He filters this vast store of knowledge through the lens of his own practical experience, discarding superstitions that bear no fruit and elevating the simple, effective remedies derived from native plants. This long process of collection is not driven by personal ambition, but by a deep empathy for the suffering of his fellow human beings. He sees the heavy cloud of anxiety and physical pain that often darkens the lives of his people, and he is determined to provide them with a dependable, written guide to comfort. As he begins to organize his life's work in the structure that will become known as the Leech Book, Bold's philosophy of healing guides every decision. He insists that the text be written in Old English, the native tongue of the people, so that its wisdom can be spoken aloud and understood by anyone who listens. He envisions the book not merely as a collection of recipes, but as a living testament to the supportive relationship between humanity and nature. In his view, the acts of foraging for herbs, preparing a salve, and administering a warm potion are all forms of quiet meditation, opportunities for both the healer and the patient to slow down and find rest. It is this profound, enduring gentleness that infuses every page of his work, transforming a practical medical manual into deeply comforted narrative of human care and natural solace. The physical artifact of Bold's Leech Book is a monument of early English craftsmanship, an object that carries the weight of its wisdom in its very structure. When held in the hands, the book feels substantial, its outer cover fashioned from thick, seasoned oak boards wrapped in dark, supple calfskin that has been cured using native tree bark. The leather is smooth but bears the natural, subtle grain of the animal's life, yielding a faint, rich aroma of wood smoke, oil, and earth. The spine is bound with stout linen cords, stitched together with a slow, deliberate strength that ensures the pages open evenly, laying flat upon a wooden desk like a pair of resting hands. To look upon this volume is to understand that what is contained within is considered precious, a treasure meant to endure through generations of cold winters and changing kings. Upon opening the heavy cover, the visual layout of the manuscript reveals a beautiful, uncluttered clarity designed to soothe the eye of the reader. The vellum pages are generous in size, cream-colored with natural variations where the pale skin catches the warm candlelight. The text is arranged in a single, broad column, surrounded by wide, quiet margins that offer a sense of space and restfulness to the page. There are no crowded lines or frantic corrections. Instead, the words flow across the vellum with a steady, rhythmic pacing. The capital letters at the beginning of each major remedy are slightly enlarged, occasionally adorned with simple, elegant ribbon patterns or soft red ink made from ground madder root. guiding the healer's eye gracefully down the narrative of the cure. The language of the Leech Book is the true heart of its design, written entirely in the rich, poetic vernacular of Old English. Unlike the formal Latin used in continental text, the words on these pages possess an immediate, grounded texture that connects directly to the daily lives of the Anglo-Saxon people. The script used by the scribe is a refined insular minuscule, characterized by its rounded, stable letter forms and clear spaces between words. Each letter is formed with a confident, unhurried stroke of the quill, creating a visual rhythm that feels almost musical. Worse for headache and gimmind, for mind looks sturdy and permanent upon the page, anchoring the fluid, fleeting nature of human thought in the enduring landscape of the written word. To read the Leech Book is to experience a deliberate slowing of time, where each phrase is constructed with care and clarity. The instructions do not rush the reader, but rather lead them step by step through the process of identification, harvesting, and preparation. The layout is inherently respectful of the natural world it describes, leaving room for the quiet contemplation of each plant's virtues. As the reader's fingers move across the raised texture of the ink on the smooth vellum, a deep sense of connection is established between the mind of the 11th century healer and the physic reality of the book itself. It stands not only as a record of medical recipes, but as a physical sanctuary where order, beauty, and practical wisdom are harmoniously bound together. To understand the full depth of the remedies contained within Bald's Leech Book, one must look into the quiet, inner world of the 10th century mind, navigating a life that was deeply attuned to the delicate balances of survival. For the people of Anglo-Saxon England, the world was a place of immense beauty, but also of profound and unpredictable change. Without the modern luxuries of prediction and control, an unexpected frost in late spring or a prolonged, sunless summer could mean the difference between a season of abundance and a winter of severe hardship. This constant vulnerability created a specific kind of mental weariness, a heavy blanket of quiet anxiety that would settle over a household as the days began to shorten. The physical darkness of the northern winter was mirrored by an internal landscape where worries about health, sustenance, and the well-being of loved ones grew like shadows in the corners of a room. This state of existential worry was often described by early English writers as a heaviness of the heart or a scattering of the mind. When the mind is constantly forced to anticipate the unseen, it becomes frayed, losing its natural rhythm and falling into a state of restless exhaustion. A person suffering from this cloud of anxiety would find no comfort in their evening rest. Their sleep would be troubled by dark, circular thoughts, and they would wake to the cold morning mist, feeling as unmoored as a ship broken from its lines. This mental fatigue was not viewed as a personal failing, but rather as a natural consequence of living in a world where the forces of nature were so vast and overwhelming. It was understood that just as the soil could become waterlogged and sour after a relentless season of rain, the human spirit could also become saturated with care, requiring a gentle, deliberate draining away of sorrow. In the face of these heavy clouds of the mind, the role of the leech was as much about restoring peace to the spirit as it was about healing the physical vessel. Bald recognized that an anxious mind could manifest as a physical tightness, a dull, throbbing ache across the brow that made the light of the sun unbearable and turned the softest spoken word into a burden. He understood that you could not treat the body without first addressing the quiet storms that raged within the thoughts. The remedies he recorded were designed to act as a gentle anchor for the drifting spirit, providing a tangible, comforting routine that pulled the individual away from their distant worries and ground them in the immediate, soothing realities of the natural world. The Leech Book, therefore, serves as a compassionate mirror to the emotional life of the 10th century, document a profound understanding of human fragility. It approaches the anxious mind with an attitude of deep gentleness, offering cures that relied on the quiet, steady properties of things that grew from the earth. By focusing the patient's attention on the slow preparation of herbs, the scent of wild flowers, and the rhythmic warmth of a prepared potion, the healer helped to clear away the mental fog. In this way, the simple acts of foraging and blending became a shared meditation, a way for the weary individual to step out of the tumultuous current of their fears and find a safe, quiet harbor with the enduring stability of nature. The landscape of 10th century England is a tapestry of undisturbed botanical wonder, a wild and ancient meadowland that stretches as far as the eye can see beneath the wide expanse of the Wessex sky. In this era, before the arrival of intensive agriculture and the clearing of the great hedges, the earth is covered in a dense, rich carpet of native flora that changes its colors with the slow turning of the seasons. What modern eyes might easily dismiss as common weeds, the persistent growths along the edges of paths, the humble clusters flourishing in ditch banks, and the resilient green shoots that carpet the forest floor were seen by the Anglo-Saxons as sacred vessels of health and vitality. Each plant was understood to hold a unique, divinely pointed virtue. Quiet power locked within its fibrous stems, its delicate petals, and its deep, probing roots that reach down in the hidden secrets of the soil. To walk slow through an early English meadow is to immerse oneself in a world of complex, earthy fragrances and subtle textures. The ground is soft underfoot, cushioned by thick layers of wild moss, low-growing clovers, and the resilient leaves of the greater plantain, which the leeches called wegbraid, or the way-broad plant, due to its habit of growing along the well-trodden paths of men. In the damp hollows where the water from summer rains collects, the wild mint and meadowsweet grow tall, releasing a sharp, refreshing scent whenever the wind brushes against their tops. These plants do not grow in neat, cultivated rows. They weave them together in a beautiful, chaotic harmony, a living testament to the unchecked fertility of the island's soil. To the healer, this wildness is not a disorder to be corrected, but a sign of pure, unadulterated strength, a direct manifestation of the earth's natural ability to renew and sustain life. Every plant within this ancient ecosystem has its own specific language, its own way of responding to the light of the sun and the heavy dampness of the evening mist. The wood betony stands straight and proud in the partial shade of old oak trees, its wrinkled leaves covered in a soft, protective down that catches the early morning dew like a collection of tiny, liquid pearls. Nearby, the bright yellow discs of the wild chamomile shine like small, grounded suns against the dark green of the grass, offering a sweet, apple-like aroma that instantly lightens the air around it. These plants are not static, they move with a slow, almost imperceptible rhythm, opening their blossoms to the warmth of the midday sky and folding them tightly as the cool shadows of twilight begin to lengthen across the downs. They exist in a state of perfect balance with their environment, untroubled by the anxieties of the human world that unfolds around them. For Bald and the leeches of his time, this rich botanical abundance was a source of profound comfort and reassurance. They knew that no matter how severe the winter might be, and no matter how heavily the cloud of anxiety might weigh upon the minds of their people, the earth would always provide the necessary means for restoration. The simple acts of observing these plants, learning their names, and understanding their preferred habitats were the first steps in the art of healing. By turning their attention to the humble weeds of the field, the early English healers discovered a deep well of peace, realizing that the remedies for the most complex human miseries were often growing quietly at their very feet, waiting to be gathered with a respectful and unhurried hand. All stories presented on this channel are global historical tales, gently curated and narrated based on themes such as the rise and fall of nations, human cultures, and extraordinary journeys through time. Among the vast assembly of plants that carpet the ancient English landscape, there is one that holds a position of singular reverence and quiet majesty within the pages of Bald's Leech Book. This is the mugwort, known in the Old English tongue as mugwort, and later celebrated in classical traditions as the girdle of St. John. To the casual traveller passing along the dusty lanes of Wessex, the mugwort appears as a sturdy, unassuming bush, growing in dense clusters where the cultivated fields meet the wild margin of the woodlands. It stands tall, often reaching the height of a man's waist. Its stiff, ribbed stems tinted with a deep, purplish hue that hints at the hidden strength contained with its fibers. The leaves are deeply incised, presenting a rich, dark green on their upper surface. But when the wind catches the plant, it reveals a startling secret. The underside of each leaf is coated in a soft, silvery white down that catches the moonlight, making the entire bush appear to glow with a faint, otherworldly luminescence in the twilight. The historical reverence for mugwort in Anglo-Saxon culture is profound, rooted in centuries of observation and a deep-seated belief in the plant's protective and restorative virtues. In the ancient Nine Herbs Lay, a poetic text that echoes through the early English medical tradition, mugwort is addressed as the oldest of herbs, a primal force of nature that possesses the power to overcome the most stubborn afflictions of the human frame. It was not viewed merely as a material ingredient to be crushed and swallowed, but as a benevolent entity, a quiet guardian of human health that stood watch over the threshold of the home. Its presence in a remedy was an assurance of efficacy, a foundational matrix upon which more complex cures could be securely built. Bald recognized that the unique qualities of this plant made it uniquely suited for treating the heavy, clouding anxieties and the deep, persistent headaches that afflicted his people during times of sudden atmospheric change. To understand the character of mugwort is to appreciate its resilience and its affinity for the spaces where human life and wild nature intersect. It does not require the rich, pampered soil of a tended monastery garden. It thrives in the gravelly earth of the wayside, the packed soil near the thresholds of timber huts, and the dry, sunny banks of ancient ditches. This hardiness was seen by the leeches as a direct reflection of its medicinal power. A plant that could withstand the trampling of cattle, the hot dust of the summer roads, and the sudden gales of autumn without. Losing its aromatic potency was a plant that could impart that stiff endurance to a fractured and weary human mind. When the wind moves through a stand of mugwort, does not bend easily, it sways with a slow, dignified rhythm, releasing a sharp, sage-like fragrance that is both cleansing and deeply grounding to those who breathe it in. In the taxonomy of the Leech Book, mugwort is classified as a warming herb, a gentle fire capable of dispersing the cold, damp congestions that settle in the head and chest when the weather turns sour. Its bitterness was understood to stimulate the vital spirits, clearing away the stagnant humours that caused the mind to grow dark and the temples to throb. As Bald sat his quiet scriptorium, recording the specific virtues of this ancient weed, he did so with a sense of deep respect for its lineage. For generations, the silver-backed leaves of the mugwort had been gathered by the people of the island to bring light into their darkest hours, and by securing its place within his book, Bald ensured that this humble guardian of the wayside would continue to offer its soothing, protective sanctuary to all who sought its aid. In the worldview of 10th century England, the earth and the heavens are not separate, isolated realms, but are instead woven together in a grand, continuous tapestry of mutual influence. The leeches of this era, guided by a tradition that stretched back to both classic antiquity and native folklore. Understand that the movements of the celestial bodies directly govern the hidden forces of the terrestrial world. Among these heavenly bodies, the moon is seen as the primary regulator of all things moisture-laden, fluid, and growing, just as the great tides of the sea rise and fall in obedience to the lunar cycle. So too are the vital juices, the subtle humours, and the medicinal essences of the plants rise and fall within their stalks. To harvest a weed without considering the position of the moon would be, in the eyes of Bold, an act of thoughtless haste, a failure to align the art of healing with the cosmic architecture of the universe. The full moon holds a position of supreme importance in the seasonal calendar of the Leech Book. When the lunar disk is fully illuminated, hanging like a brilliant, silver shield in the dark northern sky, it is believed that the Earth's vital energy has reached its absolute peak. During this specific phase of the cycle, the sap of the plants is drawn upward from the deep, silent dark of the roots, flooding in the stems, the leaves, and the delicate flowers. The plant is, in essence, breathing in the fullness of the lunar light, saturating its physical fibers with a heightened concentration of its inherent virtues. For an herb like the mugwort, which already possesses a natural affinity for the silver light of the night, the full moon represents the exact moment when its warming, protective, relieving qualities are most potent, ready to be captured by the careful hand of the healer. This medieval understanding of medicine is fundamentally holistic, requiring the physician to be a student of the stars as much as a gatherer of herbs. Bold spent countless quiet nights observing the slow, predictive progression of the moon through the constellations, learning to read the sky as a living clock that indicated when the window of perfect efficacy was open. He understood that the human body, too, was subject to these same lunar shifts, and individuals suffering from heavy, weather-induced headaches or a deep, stagnant anxiety would often find their symptoms intensifying as the moon grew full, their internal fluids responding to the same upward pull that affected the meadowlands. By gathering the remedy at the exact peak of this celestial tension, the healer was able to create a preparation that possessed the necessary strength to counteract and soothe the patient's internal imbalance. To modern minds, this practice might seem like mere superstition, but to the people of 9 feet AD, it was a deeply logical and respectful way of engaging with the natural world. It transformed the simple act of foraging into deliberate, sacred ritual that required patience, foresight, and a profound reverence for the larger order of creation. It forced the healer to slow down, to match their steps to the ancient, unhurried pacing of the cosmos, and to recognize that true healing cannot be rushed or forced according to human whim. As the full moon rose over the low, misty hills of Wessex, illuminating the silver-backed leaves of the mugwort, it served as a beautiful, glowing reminder that humanity was never alone or forgotten, but was always safe-contained with a living, breathing, and carefully ordered universe. When the midnight hour arrives and the full moon reaches its highest point in the velvet sky, the village sleep in absolute stillness, wrapped in the dark embrace of the Wessex night. Bold steps out from his timber dwelling, moving with slow, deliberate care so as not to disturb the profound silence that has settled over the land. The air is crisp and heavy with the midnight dew, carrying the clear, sharp scent of damp earth in the distant, clean mineral perfume of the chalk streams. In his hand, he carries a small, woven osier basket and a bronze knife, its surface catching the pale lunar light. He does not carry a torch. The silver radiance of the moon is so bright that it casts crisp, soft shadows across the grass, illuminating his path with a gentle, natural clarity that makes the modern world feel infinitely distant. Harvest herbs in the dead of night requires a specific kind of reverence, a quietude of body and mind that matches the resting state of the earth. Bald walks along the edge of a deep, ancient hedgerow. His leather boots sink softly in the damp, mossy ground. Every step is unhurried, a rhythmic movement through a landscape that feels suspended in time. The wild creatures of the field, the owls gliding silently beneath the canopy, the small field mice moving through the grass are undisturbed his presence, for he moves not an intruder, but as a quiet participant in the night's design. As he approaches the stand of mugwort growing near the boundary stone, he pauses, watching the silver-backed leaf sway gently in the faint midnight breeze, looking like a cluster of quiet stars brought down to rest upon the earth. Before a single stem is cut, Bald stands in silent contemplation, acknowledging the plant's virtue and the ancient lineage of the remedy he is about to prepare. He kneels upon the damp earth, feeling the cool moisture seep through the wool of his trousers, grounding him completely in the immediate reality of the moment. With his steady right hand, he guides the bronze knife to the base of the stems, selecting only the sturdiest, most vibrant stalks that have fully absorbed the lunar light. The bronze cuts through the fibrous wood with a soft, clean snap, releasing an immediate, concentrated burst of sage-like aroma in the night air. This fragrance is sharp, clean, and instantly clearing to the senses, a small preview of the healing power that will soon be offered to the weary. He each severed stalk gently in the woven basket, laying them flat so that the delicate leaves are not crushed or bruised during the return journey. He takes only what is needed, leaving the rest of the cluster to continue its slow, natural growth under the stars. The process is entirely devoid of urgency. It is a slow, methodical dialogue between the healer and the meadow, executed with a precision that honors the sanctity of life. As he finishes his gathering and stands to look back across the moonlit field, the basket in his arm feels heavy with potential, holding within its woven frame the silent, silver secret to dispersing the heavy clouds of human suffering and restoring peace to the anxious mind. The act of gathering herbs at midnight is an immersion into a profound world of tactile sensations, where every touch connects the healer directly to the primeval forces of the earth. As Bald kneels in the darkness, the first sensation is the deep, yielding cold of the Wessex soil beneath his hands. The earth is not dry or dead, it is a living, breathing matrix, saturated with the rains of the past season and heavy with the dense, cold mineral life of the chalk hills. This dampness travels slow through the skin of his fingers, a blunt, grounding reminder of the physical reality that sustains all things. It is a texture that is both rough and smooth, where tiny fragments of ancient flint mingle with the soft, decayed velvet of old mosses and the delicate, searching tips of subterranean roots. Above the soil, the night dew hangs heavily upon every leaf and stem, transforming the meadow into a silent ocean of liquid crystal. When Bald's hand brushes against the tall stalks of the mugwort, the dewdrops scatter across his skin like a sudden shower of ice-cold stars. This moisture is different from regular rain. It is pure, distilled by the quiet air of the night, holding within its microscopic spheres the very essence of the sky and the cold breath of the fields. The drops pool in the palms of his hands, drawing away the residual warmth of the day and leaving a sensation of intense, cleansing clarity. The leaf stems feel remarkably substantial in the dark, thick, slightly rubbery, and covered on their undersides with a dense, woolly down that feels as soft as carded lamb's wool against the tips of his fingers. Surrounding this immediate contact with the plant is the constant, wrapping presence of the night air. The wind has fallen to a mere sigh, but it carries a persistent, creeping cold that moves through the thick wool of Bold's tunic, chilling his shoulders and arms as he works. This air is thin, sharp, and entirely devoid of the heavy, dusty warmth of the daylight hours. Every breath he takes feels like a draught of clear spring water, expanding his lungs and sharpening his senses until the smallest sound or texture becomes magnified. The cold air acts as a natural preservative, holding the volatile oils of the cut mugwort close to the plant, preventing its healing fragrance from dissipating into the vastness of the dark sky. In this sensory stillness, the boundary between the healer and the environment begins to soften. The coolness of the air, the wetness of the dew, and the dense weight of the soil are not perceived as discomforts, but as the essential conditions of the cure. Bold movements become perfectly attuned to these physical realities. His fingers know exactly how much pressure to apply to the fibrous stems without tearing the delicate leaves, and his skin reads the subtle changes in the breeze to anticipate the shifting mist. By fully absorbing these raw, unmediated sensations of the English night, the healer becomes a bridge through which the silent, element strength of the earth can be gathered, brought indoors, and transformed in a powerful sanctuary of peace for the human mind. Leaving the silver-washed meadows behind, Bold steps through the heavy oak door of his workshop, returning to a world of enclosed warmth and quiet safety. The interior of the room is illuminated only by the deep, pulsating glow of a dying hearth fire, where the thick logs of applewood have burned down to a bed of rich, orange embers. This low, soft light cast long, undulating shadows across the rough-hewn timber walls, creating an atmosphere that is immediately comforting and deeply inward-facing. The air inside is thick, warm, and wonderfully fragrant, holding the accumulated memory of 1,000 previous healings. It is a complex, comforting aroma dominated by the dry, paper-like scent of old mosses, the rich tannic perfume of seasoned oak shelves, and the faint, sweet trace of old beeswax and tallow candles that have burned down to nothing over the long winter nights. Bold sets his woven osier basket down upon a large, smooth workbench made from a single slab of ash wood. The surface of the wood is dark with age, polished to a dull sheen by decks of friction from hands, cloths, and stone vessels. As he lays the fresh-cut mugwort upon the table, the residual cold and dampness of the midnight air begin to evaporate from the leaves, meeting the gentle warmth of the room. This thermal transition releases a secondary wave of fragrance, a rich, deep, and deeply relaxing essence that slowly expands to fill every corner of the workshop. The silver-backed leaves, still bearing tiny glints of the night dew, look luminous against the pale, cream-coloured grain of the ash wood, bridging the wild, nocturnal world of the meadow with the disciplined, peaceful order of the human sanctuary. The workshop is a place where every object has its proper place and its own quiet story to tell. Along the walls, bundles of dried herb hang from the overhead rafter beams, their silhouettes looking like sleeping birds in the dim light. There are jars of clean river sand, rolls of unbleached linen cloth, and small wood-turned boxes and containing dried roots and seeds gathered in the previous spring. The absolute stillness of the room is a physical presence, providing an immediate refuge from the chaotic winds and heavy atmospheric pressures that rage across the broader landscape. In this space, the passage of time seems to suspend itself entirely, allowing the healer to focus his mind completely on the immediate, delicate task at hand without the intrusion of external worries or the frantic pacing of the daylight hours. Sitting down upon his simple wooden stool, Bold pauses for a long moment, letting his hands rest flat upon the smooth surface of the workbench. He breathes in the warm, complex atmosphere of the room, letting the deep peace of the sanctuary settle in his own bones before he begins the work of preparation. He looks the embers of the fire, watching the faint, rhythmic pulse of their light as it matches the steady rise and fall of his own breath. In this quiet, ember-lit space, the heavy clouds of anxiety and the throbbing weariness of the human mind feel small and manageable, ready to be dissolved by the ancient, steady wisdom of the things that grow from the soil. In the quiet center of the workshop, Bald reaches for his heaviest mortar and pestle, carved from a single, solid block of dark, dense river stone. The mortar is deep and wide, its interior of once smoothed by years of grinding but still retaining a subtle, grit-like texture that is essential for breaking down the tough fibers of the plants. He lifts the stalks of mugwort from the basket, using his fingers to strip the silver-backed leaves from the woody stems, letting them drop in the dark hollow of the stone. The leaves pile up like a small, fragrant nest of green and silver, filling the vessel to its brim. The stone pestle, heavy and cool in his hand, fits perfectly in his palm, its weight providing the natural force needed to begin the slow, transformative work of the grind. The motion begins with a gentle, circular bruising, a rhythmic rolling of the stone pestle against the sides of the mortar to break open the individual cells of the mugwort leaves. As the stone moves, it creates a low, resonant grinding sound that fills the quiet room, a steady, scraping cadence that sounds like the slow wash of pebbles on a distant shore. With every revolution, the resistance of the leaf changes, the crisp, dry rustle of the fresh plant gradually softens into a heavy, yielding crunch as the midnight dew and the internal juices of the herb are released. This physical breakdown is accompanied by a sudden, intense deepening of the aroma, as the volatile oils escape from their microscopic chambers and rise in the air like a visible mist of green fragrance. As the leaves begin to lose their individual shapes, Bald transitions from a rolling motion to a steady, downward crushing stroke. The heavy stone drops with a dull, rhythmic thud, pressing the bruised pulp into the bottom of the mortar, turning the fibrous leaves into thick, uniform paste. The sound becomes wetter, a soft, damp squelch that indicates the complete liberation of the plant's healing moisture. The dark green of the upper leaves and the brilliant silver of the downy undersides fuse together into a rich, jade-colored matrix. Is a slow, hypnotic process that requires no haste. The healer's arms move with the steady efficiency of a pendulum, his breath matching the slow rise and fall of the stone pestle in his hand. After many minutes of tenuous, rhythmic labor, the mugwort is completely transformed. There are no longer any distinct leaf shapes or ragged stems left with the bowl, only a perfectly smooth, aromatic paste that clings to the dark sides of the stone mortar. The surface of the paste gleams with a natural, oily sheen, catching the low orange glow of the hearth fire. This crushed matrix holds the concentrate, unfilled tower of the midnight meadow, its sharp, clean scent now fully prepared to act as a shield against the heavy clouds of the mind. If you enjoy these peaceful journeys through the forgotten corners of history, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this narrative, and sharing it with others who seek a quiet harbor for their mind. To balance the deep, penetrating bitterness of the crushed mugwort, Bald turns his attention to a secondary vessel resting on a low shelf near the hearth. This container, fashioned from thick, salt-glazed stoneware, holds a substance of profound importance to the early medieval apothecary: raw, wild forest honey. Gathered during the high heat of midsummer from the hollow trunks of ancient oak trees deep within the forest of Bear, this honey is far removed from the thin, clear syrups of the modern era. It is a dense, living substance, possessing a rich, dark amber hue that glows with an inner, golden light when brought near the dying embers of the fire. As Bold lifts the heavy wooden lid from the stoneware jar, the immediate area is flooded with a warm, complex perfume, a concentrate sweetness that carries notes of wild clover, blossoming hawthorn, damp woodland moss, and the faint, resinous smoke of the beekeeper's torch. The physical properties of this medieval honey are defined by its remarkable viscosity and weight. When Bold plunges a carved ashwood stir stick in the jar, the substance offers a thick, stubborn resistance, clinging to the wood with a slow, powerful cohesion. As he lifts the stick, the honey ribbons downward in a continuous, unbroken stream, folding upon itself in the air like layers of molten silk before slowly settling back in the golden mass below. This slow-moving density is precisely what makes honey so valuable to the compiler of the Leech Book. It is a natural anchor, a medium capable of holding the volatile, easily dissipated oils of wild herbs in a state of suspended animation, preserving their volatile properties long after they have been severed from the living soil of the meadowlands. Beyond its role as a structural base, forest honey possesses an intrinsic preservative power that was deeply revered by the leeches, even if its biological mechanisms remained a mystery to them. They observed that while fresh fruits and unmanaged liquids would quickly spoil, turn sour, or succumb to the damp mold of the English winters, honey remained entirely untroubled by time. A jar-sealed property could sit on a cellar shelf through decades of damp gales and changing seasons, emerging as pure, sweet, and potent as the day it was drawn from the comb. In the taxonomy of 10th century medicine, honey was classified as a substance of moderate warmth and exceptional drawing power, capable of carrying the virtues of bitter herbs deep in the tissue of the body, while simultaneously soothing the raw, irritated pathways of the throat and chest. For an individual worn thin by the persistent, throbbing pressure of a weather-induced migraine or the scattered focus of a restless mind, the introduction of this golden substance into the remedy provided an immediate psychological comfort. The deep, primeval sweetness of the forest honey was not merely a mask for the medicine's bitterness, but an active participant in the soothing process, signaling to the fatigued spirit that a period of nourishment and sanctuary had arrived. As Bold measures out a generous portion of the amber liquid into shallow ceramic mixing bowl, its smooth, heavy flow brings a sense of structural order to the workspace, setting the stage for the delicate alchemy that will fuse the wild strength of the midnight weed with the concentrated sweetness of the summer forests. With both components prepared, Bold begins the delicate process of marrying the jade-green mugwort paste with the dark, amber honey. He used a flat-horn spatula to scrape every fragment of the crushed herb from the stone mortar, transferring it into small, shallow bronze basin that sits on a trivet over the low, pulsating embers of the hearth. He pours the measured forest honey directly over the herbs, watches the golden liquid slowly spreads, enveloping the dense green clumps in a shimmering, translucent embrace. The heat from the applewood coals must be managed with extreme care. It must never rise to a crackling flame, but must remain a soft, radiating warmth that gently coaxes the two distinct substances into a singular, unified compound. As the bronze basin warms, the physical properties of the mixture begin to change in a beautiful, slow-motion choreography. The thick, stubborn honey grows fluid under the influence of the gentle heat, its viscosity dropping until it runs as smooth as oil. This liquefaction allows it to penetrate the fibrous structure of the crushed mugwort, drawing the volatile, medicinal oils and the bitter, warming juices out of the plant cells and locking them into its own sugary matrix. Bold guides a small wooden paddle through the mixture, utilizing slow, figure 8 strokes that discourage scorching while ensuring a perfect distribution of the ingredients. The sound of the stirring is soft and rhythmic, a faint, sliding whisper of wood against bronze that echoes the absolute quiet of the workshop. Under the steady gaze of the healer, the colours of the remedy undergo a profound transformation. The distinct separation between the dark amber of the honey and the bright jade of the herb gradually dissolves, replaced by a rich, deep olive-green hue that possesses a remarkable depth. Tiny bubbles of trapped air rise lazily to the surface and pop, releasing combined aroma that is unlike anything found in nature, a scent that marries the sharp, cleansing, ozone-like bitterness of the midnight meadow with the heavy, floral sweetness of the summer forest. This fragrance hangs heavily in the warm air around the hearth, acting as a potent sedative to the senses even before the preparation is complete. After a long period of continuous, gentle agitation, the alchemy is finalized. The mixture has achieved a perfectly uniform, smooth consistency, clinging to the wooden paddle in a thick, lustrous coat that catches the low orange light of the fire. There are no longer 2 separate elements. They have become a sovereign salve, a concentrated vessel of natural comfort designed to shield the human mind from the heavy clouds of seasonal weariness. Bald carefully lifts the bronze basin away from the heat, setting it upon the ash wood workbench to cool slowly in the dark, allowing the newly forged bonds of the remedy to set and stabilize before it is introduced to those who wait in the shadows of pain. To understand where this remedy brings its profound relief, one must look within the walls of a traditional 10th century Anglo-Saxon dwelling. These homes are structures born directly from the surrounding forests, built with heavy, hand-hewn timbers of oak and ash that are split along the grain to retain their natural flexibility and strength. The walls are of dense wattle and dab, a mixture of woven willow branches, clay, straw, and earth that hardens over time into thick, insulating barrier against the restless English winds. Overhead, a steep, generous roof of dried river reed or straw that arches over the single room, its thick layers designed to shed the heavy rains of autumn and trap the rising warmth within. Inside, there are no internal walls or rigid separations. It is a shared space of communal shelter, where the floor is composed of packed earth covered in a clean, fragrant carpet of dried rushes, straw, and sweet-smelling field herbs. At the literal and metaphorical heart of this dwelling lies the central hearth. This is not a stone fireplace built into a wall, but a wide, shallow pit lined with river stones, situated directly in the middle of the earthen floor. The fire within this pit is kept alive with a slow, tenuous feeding of thick logs, often ash, which burns clean and bright even when green, or seasoned oak, which leaves behind a deep, long-lasting bed of glowing embers. The smoke from this central fire does not exit through a brick chimney. Instead, it rises lazily in the open space under the high rafters, creating a soft, perpetual blue haze that floats above the living area before gradually filtering out through the porous weave of the thatch roof. This blanket of smoke, far from being a nuisance, serves a practical purpose, seasoning the timber beams, repelling moisture-loving insects, and sealing the interior against the creeping dampness of the exterior world. Within this dim, amber-lit interior, the furniture is sparse, functional, and deeply grounded in its material origins. Along the thicker portions of the wattle walls sit low wooden benches and simple bed frames, elevated slightly above the earthen floor to escape the coldest draughts. These sleeping platforms are layered with thick straw mattresses and covered with heavy, hand-woven wool blankets dyed in muted earth tones of madder red, woad blue, and weld yellow. When a member of the household is stricken with a severe, weather-induced headache, or the heavy cloud of anxiety, it is to these quiet, perimeter beds that they retreat. In this space, the aggressive brightness of the outside sky is entirely excluded, replaced by a soothing, protective gloom where the only movement is the slow, predictable dancing of shadows cast by the central fire against the curved timbers of the roof. The atmosphere of such a home is inherently slow-paced and enveloping, providing a natural sanctuary for the weary. The thick walls and heavy thatch create a powerful acoustic barrier, turning the howling coastal gales into distant, rhythmic murmur that sounds like the gentle breathing of a great beast outside. The scent of the wood smoke mixes with the clean aroma of the dried rushes on the floor and the faint, resinous smell of the timber structure itself, creating a sensory environment that instantly encourages the mind to release its frantic grip on daily concerns. It is into this quiet, enclosed world of wood, earth, and amber light that Bold brings his newly prepared sovereign salve, knowing that the structural peace of the home will work in perfect harmony with the natural virtues of the remedy to restore balance to the suffering soul. When the protective gloom of the timber home, an individual rests upon a low wooden bed frame, their face turned away from the central hearth to escape the flickering orange light. The sudden drop in atmospheric pressure from the eastern gale has taken its toll. A severe, weather-induced migraine has settled behind their eyes, manifesting as a sharp, rhythmic pulse that makes even the softest sound feel like a heavy blow. Their brow is furrowed, and their breathing is shallow and strained, reflecting the tight grip of physical pain and the accompanying cloud of mental exhaustion. Bold approaches the bedside with slow, silent steps, his movements deliberate and unhurried so as not to startle the sufferer. In his hands, he carries a small wooden bowl containing the cooled olive green paste of mugwort and honey, along with a shallow horn cup filled with warm, clean spring water. The administration of the remedy is conducted with an atmosphere of profound gentleness and quiet focus. Bold sits upon a low stool beside the patient, letting his own calm presence act as an initial anchor for the restless spirit in the room. He takes a small horn spoon, dipping it into the dense, glossy mixture, and lifts a moderate portion of the sovereign salve. The paste is thick and smooth, holding its form gracefully on the spoon. He guides it toward the individual, who accepts the medicine slowly, letting the heavy, green compound rest upon their tongue. The initial taste is a surprising contrast. The intense, velvety sweetness of the wild forest honey immediately coats the mouth, followed closely by the deep, aromatic, and distinctly clean bitterness of the midnight mugwort. As the patient slowly swallows the thick paste, Bold offers the horn cup of warm water, allowing the fluid to wash away the residual bitterness and carry the herbal virtues smooth down into the body. The warmth of the water helps to immediately release the volatile oils trapped within the honey matrix, sending an immediate sensation of clearing heat upward toward the throat and post-nasal pathways. There is no rush to this process. Bold waits patiently between small spoonfuls, allowing the individual to breathe deeply, letting the complex aroma of sage, clover, and clean earth fill their senses. The simple act of receiving nourishment that was gathered under the full moon provides a tangible sense of care, breaking the isolation that so often accompanies intense physical suffering. With the final portion administered, Bold wet cleans his fingers with a damp cloth and gently places his palm flat against the patient's cool, damp forehead. This physical contact is steady and reassuring, a human shield against the invisible pressures of the storm outside. He encouraged them to close their eyes and sink heavily in the straw mattress, letting the hand-woven wool blankets hold their body in a secure embrace. The room falls back into its deep, rhythmic silence, broken only by the soft, distant sighing of the wind through the exterior thatch and the steady, low hum of the hearth embers, as the natural alchemy of the meadow begins its slow, silent work within the quiet architecture of the human frame, within the quiet, protected envelope of the dim timber room. A slow and silent transformation begins to unfold as the seconds dissolve in the deep stillness of the afternoon. The sovereign of mugwort and honey, now full received in the internal chemistry of the body, begins its patient work of restoration. In the taxonomy of the Leech Book, the warming properties of the herb are now circulating, acting as a gentle, internal fire that slow towards the cold, stagnant pressures that have gripped the patient's temples. The sharp, throbbing rhythm that had dominated their awareness for hours begins to lose its hard, jagged edges, softening into dull, distant murmur like the low rumble of a retreating sea. The tight knot of muscle at the base of the neck, coiled tight by hours of resisting the atmospheric weight of the storm, gradually relaxes, allowing the head to sink more deeply and heavily into the straw-filled bolster. As the physical pain begins its slow retreat, the mental fog that had clouded the individual's thoughts starts to clear away. The relentless, circular patterns of anxiety, the quiet, exhausting worries about the coming season and the vulnerability of the household lose their grip on the imagination. It is as if the deep, grounding bitterness of the midnight herb has acted as a broom, gently sweeping the cluttered chambers of the mind until nothing remains but a calm, spacious clarity. The patient's breathing, which had been shallow and defensive, shifts into deep, rhythmic cadence, a steady rise and fall that perfectly mirrors the slow, gentle pulse of the dying embers in the central hearth. The external world, with all its chaotic gales and shifting sky, ceases to be a threat, fading into a distant backdrop that no longer has the power to disturb the inner sanctuary of the spirit. In this state of profound relaxation, the sensory details of the room become agents of comfort rather than sources of irritation. The soft blue haze of wood smoke drifting lazily beneath the high rafter beams is no longer a heavy presence, but a protective veil that screens the eyes from the faint, amber light of the fire. The scent of the dried rushes on the earthen floor, mingled with the lingering, sage-like perfume of the prepared medicine, fills the immediate air with a clean, woodland fragrance that encourages each breath to go deeper than the last. The shadows that dance along the curved wattle and daub walls move the predictable, slow-motion grace, weaving a visual lullaby that coaxes the remaining tension out of the body's extremities, leaving the limbs feeling warm, heavy, and entirely at rest. Bold sits in the stillness, observing these subtle signs of recovery with a quiet, professional satisfaction. He notes the smoothing of the lines across the brow, the softening of the jaw, and the gentle, regular movement of the eyelids that indicates the approach of a deep, restorative sleep. This is the ultimate goal of the leech art, not a sudden, violent intervention, but the deliberate cultivation of a space where nature can perform its own quiet miracles of alignment. By bringing the wild virtue of the wayside weed into direct contact with human suffering, he has helped to restore the broken link between the individual and the earth, proving that even in the darkest and most vulnerable hours of the northern winter, a profound and enduring peace is always within reach. Behind the enduring legacy of Bald's medical wisdom stands another figure whose quiet, disciplined labor was essential to the survival of the Leech Book. This is Child, the scribe who physically penned the words, translating the spoken intentions and rough notes of the healer into the permanent, elegant lines of the manuscript. In the cool, grey light of the Winchester scriptorium, Child spends his days bent over a high, sloping wooden desk, his world narrowed down to the small, white expanse of a prepared vellum page. While Bold navigated the wild meadows and the damp winds of the coast, Syld navigated the precise geography of the written line, tracking the structure of sentences with the same patience and reverence that a tracker uses when following a path through a dense forest. The physical action of Syld's writing is a marvel of rhythmic coordination and sensory focus. His right hand holds the goose quill, its tip carefully slit and shaped by his small iron knife to ensure a steady, predictable flow of the dark iron gall ink. As he lowers the pen to the smooth surface of the sheepskin, the silence of the room is punctuated by a distinct, rhythmic scratching sound, a soft, whispering cadence that matches the steady rise and fall of his own breath. Each letter of the Old English script is built with multiple, deliberate strokes of the hand, a rounded loop for an O, a sturdy vertical downstroke for a th, and a graceful curve for an M. There is no room for haste or distraction in this work. A single careless drop of ink or a forgotten word could ruin days of meticulous labor, forcing the scribe to scrap the precious vellum and begin anew. To maintain the absolute uniformity of the text across hundreds of pages requires a deep, meditative state of concentration. Child's eyes are locked on the point where the dark ink meets the pale skin, watching the liquid lines spread slightly before binding permanently with the organic fibers of the page. He must constantly balance the pressure of his fingers, ensuring that the lines do not grow too thin and faint, nor too thick and prone to smudging. Beside his desk, a small hourglass runs silent, its fine sand dropping in a tenuous stream that mirrors the slow accumulation of words upon the vellum. As the hours pass and his fingers grow stiff from the cold draughts that slide along the stone floor, he does not falter, drawing strength from the profound, quiet importance of the task he has been entrusted to complete. By honoring Child's contribution, we recognize that the preservation of ancient knowledge is always a collaborative act of devotion. Without the scribe's steady hand, the sharp eye, and the unyielding endurance against the physical strains of the writing desk, Bold's insights into the healing virtues of the English weeds would have vanished like smoke into the northern sky. The physical manuscript that survives in the modern era is a monument to Child's breath and muscle, a living testament to a time when every written word was an act of deliberate creation, carved out of the darkness of the past to offer a steady, guiding light to the generations yet unborn. The intellectual architecture of Bold's Leech Book is not an isolated creation born solely from the soil of Wessex. Rather, it represents a brilliant, harmonious synthesis of two seemingly divergent worlds. As one turns the vellum pages, it becomes clear that Bold was a scholar of remarkable breadth, possessing access to a network of knowledge that stretched far beyond the misty borders of 10th century England. His text seamlessly integrates the classical, structured medical traditions of the Greco-Roman world with the rich, intuitive, and deeply grounded folklore of the native British Isles. It is a dialogue between the formal libraries of the Mediterranean and the practical experience of the northern hedgerow, a cross-cultural marriage that elevates the humble weeds of the English countryside in the grand lineage of ancient medical science. This continental connection was facilitated by the vibrant intellectual exchange that flourished within the monastic scriptoriums of the Anglo-Saxon Golden Age. Manuscripts containing the Latin translations of Galen, Dioscorides, and the late Roman physician Marcellus, Empiricus made their way across the English Channel, carried in the saddlebags of travelling bishops and scholars. Bold studied these texts with a discerning eye, recognition that the systematic classification of bodily humours and atmospheric fluences found in Mediterranean philosophy provided a valuable framework for understanding disease. Yet, he was not a passive copyist. He understood that a remedy designed for the dry, sun-baked hills of Italy or Greece could not simply be applied without modification to a patient shivering in the damp, waterlogged valleys of southern England. Thus, the true genius of the Leech Book lies in its translation of classical theory into local reality. Where a Roman text might prescribe an exotic Mediterranean plant that was completely unavailable in the cold northern climate, Bold looks to his own landscape, finding a native British equivalent that possessed the same energetic virtues. He matches the sophisticated humoral theories of the South with the traditional, spoken wisdom of the local Wertwerders, the native root gatherers and herbalists who had spent generations observing the specific properties of the island's flora. The result is a text where a classical diagnosis for a weather-induced migraine is paired with an instruction to gather wild mugwort from an English wayside under a full moon. Bring the authority of ancient science direct down in the dirt and moss of the Wessex fields. This integration of global knowledge and local intuition created a medical manual that was both profoundly sophisticated and deeply practical. It demonstrated a worldview that was secure enough to welcome foreign learning, yet proud enough to honor the quiet wisdom of its own ancestors. By anchoring the great medical traditions of the ancient world with the familiar textures and smells of the English meadow, Bold did more than just preserve a collection of recipes. He validated the lived experience of his people, showing them that the simple weeds growing outside their doorsteps were part of a vast, interconnected universe of healing that spanned across empires, seas, and centuries of human care. As the narrative of the Leech Book unfolds, the text guides the reader's eye from the silver clusters of mugwort to another green guardian of the English landscape, the wood betony, known in the Old English vernacular as biskopwort or bishop wort. This remarkable plant occupies a position of immense trust within Bold's medical framework. It is a creature of the woodlands, preferring the dappled, gentle shade found beneath the wide canopies of ancient oak and beech trees, where the soil remains moist, dark, and undisturbed throughout the year. The wood betony stands with a quiet, structural elegance. Its straight, square stems rise from a rosette of crinkled, scallop-edged leaves that are covered in a fine, velvety down. In the height of summer, it produces dense spikes of deep purple, tube-like blossoms that draw the bees from miles around. But to the leech, the true virtue of the plant resides in its bitter, aromatic leaves and its tough, fibrous roots. In the philosophy of 10th century healing, wood betony was regarded as an unparalleled shield for the human mind, particularly valued for its ability to protect the individual from the twin afflictions of dark dreams and nocturnal weariness. The Anglos understood that when the body is exhausted by sudden changes in the weather or the heavy burdens of daily labor, the mind becomes vulnerable during the hours of darkness. The sleep of a fatigued person can easily become fragmented, invaded by unsettling shadows, waking terrors, and a restless, circular anxiety that leaves the spirit feeling more depleted at dawn than it was at dusk. To counteract this invisible heavy pressure, the Leech Book prescribes the use of betony as a spiritual and physical anchor, a natural sedative capable of closing the doors of the imagination against the intrusions of the dark. The preparation of betony for this purpose is described by Bold with a characteristic, slow-handed precision. The leaves are gathered during the transition from morning mist to midday sun, when the dew has just evaporated, leaving the volatile oils concentrate within the plant's tissue. Once dried and reduced to a fine, pale green powder, the herb can be administered in various soothing forms. For those tormented by a racing mind at midnight, the Leech Book recommends blending the powdered betony into a cup of warm, unpasteurized goat's milk or steeping it in clean river water that has been heated over the hearth. The resulting tonic carries a distinct, earthy flavor, a combination of woody bitterness and a clean, resinous aftertaste that instantly signals a sense of security and containment to the central nervous system. Beyond its physical consumption, The mere presence of wood betony within the sleeping quarters was believed to exert a calming, protective influence over the household. Many families would dry large bundles of the herb, hanging them from the timber rafters directly above the beds, or sewing the crushed leaves in the coarse linen casings of their straw pillows. As the sleeper turned their head during the night, the friction would release a faint, tenuous cloud of betony's dry, clean fragrance, creating a localized sanctuary of peace that isolated the mind from the howling winter winds outside. By documenting these multifaceted uses, Bald elevated the humble woodland plant into symbol of maternal care, offering his people a tangible, aromatic defense against the vulnerabilities of the night. To fully appreciate the world from which Bald drew his remedies, one must wander away from the cleared pastures and step in the great, whispering forests that bordered the Anglo-Saxon settlements of Wessex. In the 10th century, these woods were not small, isolated groves, but vast, primeval wildernesses dominated by ancient oaks, towering beeches, and silence of ash and hazel. To enter this forest is to cross a threshold into a realm of deep, perpetual twilight, where the aggressive glare of the open sky is filtered through a massive, interlocking canopy of leaves. The light that reaches the forest floor is soft, fragmented, and green, shifting lazily as the wind breathes through the upper branches. Here, the air is cool and remarkably still, holding a rich, damp humidity that smells of deep moss, decaying leaf mold, and the sweet, resinous sap of ancient wood. The floor of these ancient woodlands is an intricate, layered ecosystem, completely undisturbed by human hands. It is covered in a thick, spongy carpet of mosses that cushion every footstep, absorbing the sound of the world and wrapping the forest in a profound, meditative silence. In the deep shade of these giants, water is conserved with incredible efficiency. Tiny streams fed by hidden chalk spring win their way through the roots, their clear waters sliding over smooth, black pebbles with a faint, musical gurgle. It is within these damp, sheltered hollows, protected from the drying heat of the summer sun and the biting severity of the coastal gales, that some of the leech book's most treasured medicines find their sanctuary. The undisturbed soil, rich with the accumulated nutrients of centuries of fallen leaves, gives these forest herbs an exceptional purity and strength. As the seasons turn, the forest undergoes a slow, majestic transformation that dictates the work of the healer. In the spring, before the canopy fully closes, the forest floor is a brief ocean of pale anemones and wild bluebells, their delicate stems pushing through the dead leaves of the previous winter. By midsummer, the dense shade has established its rule, creating a cool refuge where the wood betony and wild violet can grow without fear of scorching. When autumn arrives, the canopy flares into magnificent display of gold, russet, and deep amber before dropping its leaves to form a fresh, insulating blanket over the resting roots below. Bald understood these cycles deeply, viewing the forest not as a dark place of danger, but as a vast, benevolent storehouse of natural wisdom that operated according to its own ancient and unhurried laws. For the Anglo-Saxon community, the forest was a multifaceted presence, a source of timber for their homes, mast for their foraging swine, and above all, a sanctuary for healing. When the open downs were buffeted by heavy atmospheric pressures that left the human mind feeling fractured and weary, the forest offered a physical and psychological escape. To step beneath the shade of an ancient oak was to enter a space where time seemed to slow down, matching the deep, slow growth of the trees themselves. By wandering through these whispering woods to gather the roots and leaves prescribed in his manuscript, Bald did not just collect materials for his potions. He absorbed the very quietude of the forest, infusing his remedies with the steady, unyielding peace of the ancient English wild. The relationship between the early English people and their environment is nowhere more vividly preserved than within the very structure of the Old English medical vocabulary. When Bald sits in his scriptorium to catalogue the various miseries of the human frame, the terms he employs are not clinical, sterile labels derived from abstract roots. Instead, they are deeply descriptive, poetic compound words known as kennings that reflect an immediate, tactile understanding of suffering and its intimate connection to the natural world. To examine these ancient words is to discover a worldview where illness is described through the imagery of the landscape, and where the human body is seen as a vessel continually responding to the invisible forces of the sky, the wind, and the turning of the earth. A primary example of this linguistic imagery is found in the word Bald uses for a severe, throbbing headache, he-fods, while modern ears hear a simple combination of head and ache to the Anglo-Saxon mind. The word carried a sense of an internal echo or a persistent, heavy resonance within the chamber of the skull. It was a term that evoked the sound of waves beating against a coastal cliff or the steady, rhythmic thud of a woodcutter's axe in a distant valley. When the atmospheric pressure dropped and the eastern gales brought the damp mist inland, the he-fod east was not viewed as isolated mechanical failure, but as a state of internal weather, a storm that had settled within the boundaries of the mind, clouding the thoughts and making the light of the sun as unbearable as an open flame. Similarly, the emotional and mental weariness that we today might classify as anxiety or nervous exhaustion was described by the leeches through terms that emphasized a physical alteration of the spirit. They spoke of the mind as being modsirig, or mood careful, a state where the thoughts are weighed down by an excess of heavy caution, turning every anticipation of the future into a burden. Another profound term found in the pages of the Leech book is Jameen, Bana, which translate literally to the murderer of memory, or the destroyer of the mind, used to describe the absolute paralysis of thought that accompanies deep, long-term exhaustion. These words show that the Anglo-Saxons did not separate psychological sorrow from physical illness. They recognized that a fractured spirit could dull the eyes and lock the muscles of the brow just as surely as a physical blow. By utilizing this grounded, poetic language, Bald's Leech book achieved something that modern medical texts often lose, an immediate, empathetic connection with the sufferer. When a patient heard their condition described in words that mirrored the heavy clouds, the cold winds, and the deep silences of the landscape they walked every day, it provided a comforting sense of validation. They understood that their pain was a known part of the created order, a seasonal winter of the body that had been experienced by their ancestors and documented by the leeches. This shared vocabulary turned the act of diagnosis into a comforting ritual, establishing a secure framework of meaning within which the slow, patient work of herbal healing could safely begin. When the wheel of the year tilts toward the autumn equinox, the entire character of the English landscape undergoes a slow, majestic softening. The brilliant, high gold of the summer sun gives way to a pale, slanted light that stretches long, gentle shadows across the downs of Wessex early in the afternoon. In the mornings, the valleys are filled with a thick, silent river of white fog that clings to the riverbeds and blankets the low thatched roofs of the villages until the midday breeze slowly dissolves it into the upper air. This shifting light brings with it a noticeable cooling of the earth, the soil, which had been warm and dry under the summer skies, grows dark, damp, and heavy with the first persistent rains of the turning season. It is a time of profound transition, a quiet gathering in of the world's energies as nature prepares itself for the long, cold sleep of the northern winter. For the people of the 10th century, this seasonal shift was not merely a change in the view from their timber doorways, but a profound physical and emotional event that demanded careful preparation. Bald recognized that the arrival of autumn, with its shortening days and prolonged periods of grey, sunless skies, often brought us with a form of internal shadow, a deep, stagnant weariness known to the leeches as winter melancholy. They observed that as the light faded from the sky, the vital spirits of certain individuals would also seem to recede, leaving them vulnerable to a heavy, immobilizing sorrow that dulled the appetite, locked the joints in a cold stiffness, and clouded the thoughts with a persistent, low-grade anxiety. Rather than waiting for this darkness to completely overwhelm the household, the Leech Book prescribed a sophisticated regimen of preventive care designed to fortify the human vessel before the true severity of the winter set in. The strategy recorded by Bald for counteracting this seasonal decline was rooted in the concept of internal warmth and continuous, gentle circulation. As the external world grew cold and damp, the lifestyle of the individual had to be intentionally shifted to preserve the body's native fire. The Leech Book recommended transition in diet, moving away from the light, cooling foods of the summer months toward rich, warming potages infused with aromatic seeds like fennel and mustard, which were believed to disperse the cold humours before they could settle within the chest and brain. Simultaneously, the home was prepared as a sensory sanctuary. The central hearth was kept continuously burning with dry, sweet-smelling woods like apple and birch, creating a constant, low, radiating heat that fought off the creeping dampness of the exterior fog. In addition to these environmental adjustments, the early English healers utilized a series of gentle, daily tonics made from the late summer harvest of wild herbs to shield the mind from the approaching dark. Infusions of wood betony and wild chamomile were administered warm each evening as the twilight began to deepen, providing a regular, comforting ritual that helped to anchor the drifting imagination. These botanical preparations acted as an artificial sunlight, keeping the internal pathway of the spirit open, clear, and resilient against the heavy atmospheric pressures of the autumn storms, by treating the transition into winter not as a sudden crisis to be feared, but as a predictable natural cycle that could be gracefully navigated through patience and foresight. Ball off his community a beautiful, enduring model of preventative health, ensuring that the inner light of the mind could burn brightly even when the world outside was wrapped in shadow and ice. With the enclosed sanctuary of the workshop, the high rafter beams of old oak serve as a secondary garden, a silent, inverted meadow where the summer harvest is carefully cured and preserved. Hanging bundles of wild herbs, tied securely with coarse hemp twine, line the wooden timbers from one end of the room to the other, creating a dense, hanging canopy of dried foliage. Here, the silverback stalks of mugwort, the wrinkled leaves of wood betony, and the delicate flowering heads of wild chamomile are suspended upside down, a deliberate position that allows the remaining vital juices and essential oils to flow downward in the leaves rather than evaporating into the air. As the damp breeze of autumn passes outside, the rising warmth from the central hearth fire slowly circulates among these hanging bundles, gently drawing out their moisture and sealing their medicinal virtues with their dried fibers. The physical appearance of this drying room is a testament to the patient, slow-moving economy of 10th century medicine. As the plants dry, their vibrant greens and deep purples gradually soften into beautiful, muted palette of sage, olive, russet, and slate grey. The leaves, once supple and heavy with dew, shrink and grow crisp, their edges curling tightly as they transform into brittle, delicate structures that rustle softly like old parchment whenever the door is opened. Tiny seeds and dried petals occasionally detach from the bundles, drifting lazily through the air before settling upon the packed earth floor below, adding to the rich accumulation of organic history that defines the space. To look upward into these rafters is to see a year of careful foraging frozen in time, an organized treasury of health waiting to be brought down when the winter cold bites deepest. The true definition of this space, however, is found in extraordinary, layered atmosphere of fragrance. The tenuous drying of so many diverse botanical species creates a complex, deeply comforting aroma that completely dominates the interior of the building. It is a scent that changes with the humidity of the day, thin and clean when the sun shines through the small windows, but growing rich, heavy, and deeply sedative when the external air is damp with evening mist. The sharp, sage-like bitterness of the mugwort blends seamlessly with the warm, vanilla-like sweetness of dried meadow sweeten the dry, straw-like perfume of the betony. This thick cloud of fragrance acts as an invisible shield, filtering out the chaotic anxieties of the outside world and of anyone who crosses the threshold in a state of immediate, physical peace. For Bold, the maintenance of this hanging garden is a daily meditation, a quiet checking of the moisture levels and the strength of the stems. He moves down the line of timbers with a slow, practiced eye, touching the leaves to see if they are ready to be stripped and stored in the stoneware jars, or if they require more time in the gentle warmth of the rafters. There is no desire to rush this curing process. He understands that the earth takes its time to grow the medicine, and the air must take its time to perfect it, by allowing the herbs to dry in their own unhurried rhythm. The healer preserves not just the material chemistry of the plants, but the very essence of the quiet, sun-drenched fields from which they were pulled, ensuring that a fragment of summer's peace remains alive in the dark middle of the English winter. You find solace in these quiet reflections on the healing arts of our ancestors. Please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, like this story, and share it with those who appreciate a slow, gentle journey in the peaceful corners of the past, while the vast, untamed hedgerows and the deep, twilight precincts of the primeval forests provide the leeches of 10th century England with a wealth of botanical medicine. There exists a parallel domain where the art of healing is cultivated with a more deliberate, human geometry, alongside the wild foraging site, within the quiet stone enclosures of the monastic houses and the protected clearings of the larger settlements. Small, structured herb gardens are carefully maintained. These gardens, known in the Old English tongue as a wurtzard, literally a wart yard or herb court, represent a beautiful, harmonious balance between human order and the wild, unchecked vitality of the earth. They are spaces where the soil is systematically turned, cleared of rocks, and divided into simple, raised beds, creating a localized sanctuary, where the most critical healing plants can be closely studied, tended, and protected from the unpredictable hazards of the open countryside. The architecture of an Anglo-Saxon herb garden is inherently modest, practical, and deeply integrated in the surrounding landscape. The individual cultivation beds are typically rectangular, edged with low, woven hurdles of split hazel or willow branches that hold the rich, dark soil in place and prevent the encroaching weeds of the wilderness from choking the chosen crops. Narrow, packed earth pathway wind between these raised boxes, allowing the healer to move slowly through the garden without compacting the soil near the roots. Here, in the clear, open sunlight, plants that might be difficult to locate in the deep forest or easily trampled along the busy waysides are given a dedicated space to flourish. It is a landscape of quiet, miniature perfection, where the chaotic beauty of the English wild is invited to settle in a rhythm of gentle, human care. Within these neat boundaries, the plants grow with a robust, concentrated energy that reflects the daily attention they receive. In one plot, the wild chamomile forms a dense, feathery cushion of green, its pale golden discs nodding lazily in the afternoon breeze. In another, rows of garden sage and dark-leaved hyssop stand in sturdy rows, their textured surfaces catching the faint northern sun. Yet, even with this ordered environment, the leeches do not seek to completely dominate or alter the intrinsic nature of the flora. They understand that the medicine derives its ultimate potency from its connection to the broader cosmos, to the same rains, the same morning mists, and the same lunar cycles that govern the wild meadows. The orchard is not a factory, but a school of patient observation, where the healer learns the specific language of each leaf, tracing its growth from the first pale shoot of spring to the final seed head of late autumn. This dual reliance on both the structured garden and the wild hedgerow defines the holistic philosophy of Bold's era. Elite did not view the cultivated plant as superior to its wild cousin, nor did they look down upon the humble, weeds that volunteered in the ditches, rather. They saw them as two halves of a singular, benevolent creation. When the heavy clouds of the autumn gales brought the heathod east and the cold weariness of winter to the village, the healer could step into the structured garden for immediate, reliable access to foundation remedies, while still looking to the great forest for the rare, deep-rooted secrets of the earth. By maintaining these quiet courts of green order, the people of 9th AD created a physical manifestation of their inner desire for balance, a peaceful, intermediate world where humanity and nature could walk hand in hand, sharing the quiet work of restoration and rest. In the comprehensive system of healing preserved within Bold's Leech Book, the material elements used to prepare a remedy are selected with a level of care that matches the gathering of the herbs themselves. Among these foundation elements, none is more critical, yet more beautifully simple, than pure, running spring water of 10th century's Wessex. Water is not a neutral fluid or a mere solvent, it is a living, primordial substance, a direct gift from the deep arteries of the earth that carries its own intrinsic virtues of cooling, cleansing, and quiet renewal. When a remedy calls for the steeping of dried roots or the boiling of fresh leaves, Bold insists that the water be drawn not from stagnant village ponds or sluggish, silt-laden rivers, but from the high, active chalk springs that bubble up naturally through the clean stone of the downs. The journey to collect this water is an act of deliberate preparation that occurs in the quiet hours of the early morning, just as the first pale grey light begins to dissolve the night mist. The healer carries a clean, unglazed ceramic pitcher or a vessel carved from smooth horn, ensuring that no residual oils or old resins from previous preparations can taint the purity of the liquid. At the site of the spring, the water emerges from the dark heart of the hill, filtering through thick layers of ancient flint and white chalk until it arrives at the surface with an absolute, crystalline clarity. It is exceptionally cold, holding the deep, steady temperature of the subterranean earth. And as it pools in the stone basin, it releases a clean, mineral fragrance that matches the fresh air of the downs. To draw this water requires a patient, steady hand, lowering the vessel in the pool with a slow movement that does not disturb the fine sand or the green mosses that line the bottom. Once filled, the liquid within the pitcher seems to hold the quietude of the spring itself, its surface perfectly still, reflecting the soft morning sky like a mirror of liquid silver. In the taxonomy of the Leech Book, this water is valued for its ability to act as a pure, unblemished slate, because it contains no impurities or stagnant humours. It is unique, capable of absorbing the complex biochemical virtues of the herbs, allowing the warming oils of the mugwort or the protective essences of the wood betony to infuse completely throughout the fluid without resistance or distortion. Back in the warmth of the workshop, the water is heated slowly over the applewood embers of the central hearth, its temperature raised not to a violent, roiling boil that might scorch the delicate leaves, but to a gentle, steaming simmer, as the dried botanical fragments are dropped in the clean vessel. The warm spring water gently coaxes their tightly wound structures to open, hydrate, and release their deep green color and comforting fragrance into the liquid. It is a slow, beautifusion of elements, the pure moisture of the earth meeting the sun-drenched virtues of the meadowlands, bound together within a clean container to create a gentle, liquid sanctuary capable of cooling the hot pressures of the human mind and bring profound rest to the weary spirit. As the late summer afternoons stretch long and golden over the Wessex Downs, the edges of the old stubble, fields and the sunny banks of the chalk streams become blanketed with a low, feathery green carpet. This is the habitat of the wild chamomile, known to Bold and the compilers of the Leech Book as mate. Of all the 9 sacred herbs of the ancient northern traditions, chamomile is perhaps the most beloved for its immediate, maternal gentleness. It grows to the earth, its highly segmented, thread-like leaves looking like delicate green lace. From this soft cushion rise small, daisy-like flowering heads with brilliant white petals that arch downward, framing a prominent, conical center of vibrant gold. When stepped upon or brushed by the hem of a wool tunic, the plant does not bruise silently. Instead, it releases an immediate, unmistakable burst of fragrance, warm perfume that smells of sweet green apples, wild honey, and dry summer straw. The harvesting of these delicate blossoms is a task that requires a light, patient touch and an appreciation for the slow pacing of the natural day. Bold gathers the chamomile in the high heat of midday, when the sun is at its zenith and the dew of the morning has been completely evaporated by the warmth. At this specific hour, the volatile, calming oils are concentrated entirely in the golden centers of the open flowers. Moving slow down the margin of the field, the healer does not rip the plant from its roots. Instead, using his thumb and forefinger, he gently pinches the slender stem just beneath the flower head, popping the blossom cleanly into his woven basket. It takes hours of quiet, repetitive movement beneath the wide blue sky to gather a single pound of these golden discs, a meditative labor that fills the hands and clothing with a persistent, soothing aroma. Once brought back to the workshop, the chamomile flowers are spread out in a single layer upon clean linen, cloths to dry in the shade, away from the direct heat of the fire which might dissipate their delicate virtue. When fully dried, these small golden cones become the primary remedy in the Leech Book for easing frayed nerves and encouraging deep, restorative sleep in those whose minds are spinning with the day's anxieties. Bold prepares the herb by steeping a handful of the dried blossoms in a vessel of hot spring water, covering the pot with a wooden lid to trap the escaping steam. As the flowers rehydrate, they turn the water a pale, luminous straw gold, releasing a heavy, sweet-scented vapor that instantly fills immediate breathing space of the patient, slowing the pulse and softening the tight lines around the eyes before a single sip is taken. To drink this infusion at the end of a long, exhausting season is to receive a direct transmission of the summer's warmth and security. The flavor is mild, slightly sweet, with a comforting, herbaceous depth that gently coats the throat and warms the stomach. In the holistic framework of 10th century medicine, Chamomile acts as a powerful disperser of internal wind and emotional agitation, settling the restless humours that cause the mind to flicker like a candle in a drafty hallway. As the sufferer finishes the warm draught and lies down beneath their heavy wool blankets, the quiet, apple-scented virtue of the May settles deep in their bones, dissolving the final remnants of daily care and guiding the spirit smooth into a deep, dreamless slumber that heals the weariness of both body and mind. If these journeys into the slow, aromatic world of ancient healing bring a sense of quiet and comfort to your day, please consider subscribing to the channel, liking this chapter, and sharing it with others who seek a peaceful harbour from the frantic pace of the modern world. As the late autumn gales begin to rattle the heavy oak shutters of the workshop, the focus of the leech's work shifts from the active gathering of the fields to the disciplined preservation of the harvest, to ensure that the virtues of the dried mugwort, betony, and chamomile survive the long, punishing dampness of the English winter. Bold lie an array of specialized storage vessels. The workbench is cleared of its grinding stones, placed by rows of salt-glazed stoneware jars, small boxes carved from cattle horn, and neat linen bags laid out like quiet soldiers ready to defend the health of the village. Each container is selected with a precise understanding of how different materials interact with the delicate essences of the dried plants, forming a sophisticated defensive barrier against the creeping rot of the cold season. The heavy stoneware jars are the primary strongholds of the workshop, reserved for the most volatile herbs whose oils are easily dissipated by exposure to the air. These vessels, fired in the high heat kilns of the southern ports, possess a thick, vitrified surface that is completely impervious to moisture. As Bold transfers the dried chamomile blossoms in the dark, cool interior of a jar, the material provides an absolute shield against both the external dampness and the faint, amber light of the hearth fire. The jars are sealed with thick plugs of seasoned corked discs of oak wood wrapped in oiled leather, then bound tightly round the neck with hemp cord. With these dark chambers, the herbs are suspended in a state of perfect preservation, holding their sweet, apple-like fragrance intact until the day they are unsealed to treat a winter fever. For smaller, rarer preparations such as dried seed, powdered roots, or specialized ointments, Bold utilize containers made from cattle horn. These horn boxes are beautiful examples of early medieval craftsmanship, created by heating translucent layers of horn until pliable, then pressing them into smooth, cylindrical tubes fitted with tight wooden bases and caps. The horn material is naturally dense, light, and remarkably airtight, making it the ideal medium for storing delicate powders that would quickly spoil if exposed to a single drop of condensation. When a visitor lifts the small cap of a horn box, the smooth, organic surface feels warm to the touch, a stark contrast to the cold stone jars, reflecting the protective, stable environment it provides for the precious medicinal compounds within. Finally, for the bulky, fibrous plants that require a continuous, subtle ventilation to prevent the settling of mold, Bold employs bags sewn from unbleached river linen. These bags hang in neat rows from the lower pegs along the dry timber walls, away from the direct drafts of the doorways but within reach of the hearth's gentle warmth. The loose weave of the linen allows the herbs to breathe, letting any residual internal moisture slowly escape in the dry air of the room while still protecting the leaves from dust and smoke. To walk past these hanging pouches is to experience a gentle, rhythmic pulsing of aroma, as each shift in the room's temperature coaxes a faint, comforting breath of summer air through the linen cloth, reassuring the healer that the silent strength of the meadows remains alive and waiting within its winter shroud. The long preparation is finally complete, and the great wheel of the season locks into its coldest quarter. outside the thick wattle and daub walls of the workshop, the first true snow of the winter begins to fall from a heavy, violet-grey sky. It drops silently, with the violent fury of the autumn gales, slowly dusting the bare branches of the oak forest and covering the empty, frozen meadows in a clean, uniform blanket of absolute white. The damp paths where Bald walked at midnight to gather his herbs are now erased, swallowed by the quiet descent of the northern winter. The world outside has entered a period of deep, necessary hibernation, its colours drained away and its voices hushed by the thick insulation of the frost. Yet, within the sturdy timber walls of the sanctuary, the atmosphere remains violently alive, warm and secure. The central hearth fire burns with a steady, comforting efficiency, its thick logs of seasoned ash throwing a deep, orange glow across the smooth surface of the ash wood workbench and the neat rows of salt glazed stoneware jars. The air inside is thick and incredibly rich, holding the concentrated essence of a year's patient labour. It is a fragrance that defies the freezing world outside, a deep, complex tapestry woven from the sweet green apples of dried chamomile, the sharp, ozone-like cleanliness of midnight mugwort, the earthy weight of forest honey, and the faint, resinous smoke of the applewood embers. Bald sits quietly upon his wooden stool, his hands resting flat upon the smooth timber table, listening to the soft, rhythmic sighing of the wind as it brushes harmlessly against the thick thatch roof overhead. On the shelf beside him, completed pages of the Leech Book rest securely within their leather wrapping. The elegant, dark lines penned by Kild preserve the names and virtues of the wayside weeds for generations of sufferers who have not yet been born. There is no longer any need for haste, no lingering shadow of anxiety or atmospheric weariness within these walls. The healer has done his work. He has gathered the silent strength of the earth, married it with human care, and locked it safely away within a sanctuary of absolute peace. As the twilight deeps and the fire settles in a bed of brilliant, pulsing coals, the workshop becomes a monument to the enduring wisdom of the past. It stands as a reminder that no matter how severe the external storm or how heavy the clouds that gather within the human mind, nature always provides a path back to balance and rest. Surrounded by the preserved beauty of the summer meadows and the comforting warmth of the hearth, Bald closes his eyes and breathes in the ancient, steady fragrance of his remedies, stepping forward in the quiet darkness of the winter night with a heart that is entirely at peace. The channel History Under Moonlight is a storytelling platform created for entertainment, inspiration, education, and the promotion of relaxation and peaceful sleep. All stories presented on this channel are global historical tales, gently curated and narrated based on themes such as the rise and fall of nations, human cultures, and extraordinary journeys through time.